Good evening, listeners. It's me, your host, Ramblingramm. I'm here with some more stories to scare, shock, and horrify you. Or possibly, just possibly, let you know what's really out there in the dark. Enjoy, listeners. I Can See the Sun at Night by Gymnopede. 3 days. I've been seeing it for 3 days. I don't know what's wrong with the world, but I swear I can see the sun at night. It all started last Friday. Being the insomniac that I am, I was watching Netflix all through 3 a.m. trying to crunch off some time out of the night in an attempt to get sleepy. I soon got choked up by heat in my room, so I decided to take a stroll in my backyard. I walked out of the back door, down my porch, and began walking around, breathing in the cool night air. My backyard is usually only illuminated by the moon. It also borders with the woods nearby, close enough that I often see fireflies in the distance. I spent a few minutes walking around, before I turned my head upwards to look at the stars. What I saw next, though, left me with worries. Directly above, I could make out a circular, illuminated object. I shook my head, thinking I was seeing things, but once I looked up, I was just certain. It was the sun. Now, I have never used drugs in my life. I am on no medication, and I sure as fucking hell was not drunk or asleep. Regardless of the fact that it was definitely bright, it cast no light on the world around me. No shadows either. My boggled mind just shut down at the bizarre sight and decided that I'd better go back inside. I can't explain the feeling, but I felt that I just shouldn't be outside. I strode quickly to my door, but before I could enter my house, I heard a sound coming from the street in my neighbourhood. It sounded like a raspy, booming voice, and it triggered all sorts of alarms in my head. I entered my house and immediately went to take a look through my front windows. Out in the open, in the middle of the night, I could make out my neighbours roaming and moaning in the middle of the road, their gaze fixed at the sky above. They had all placed their hands on their heads and walked small steps in random directions. After half a minute or so, as if on cue, they all shifted their gaze towards the window I was watching them from, and began to walk towards it. The closer they got, I could tell that their skin was wrinkly and saggy, as if they had all suddenly aged terribly. Without a second thought, I began moving my furniture as an attempt to bar my front door and windows, because I sure as fuck wasn't going to let some ghouls in my house. I ran and bought some planks from my basement. I'm an amateur carpenter, and my nail gun, and quickly fixed them in place on my door and windows. Soon enough, I began to hear thuds on the barricades, my heart racing with every sound coming from outside. Their constant moaning became louder and louder, and made my ears ring. My neighbours apparently were too weak to penetrate the barricades, which put me at relative ease. After a few hours, the thudding came to an immediate stop. Once I made sure that I was safe, I rushed up the stairs to one of my second-floor windows and took a look outside. As if by magic, all my neighbours had simply vanished, which made no sense, taking into account how slowly they moved. The The same thing happened the next 2 nights. My neighbours kept roaming the streets, hands on their heads, moaning and staring at the sky. During the day, the area was dead. When I say dead, I mean there was no activity, anywhere. No cars were moving, and I could see none of my neighbours, either outside or in their homes through their windows. I don't know what to make of this, but I can't hold out in my house forever. Supplies are running out, and I'm afraid to go outside. I think I can also hear moaning in the woods now. If someone has any idea what's going on, please, help me out. I will never work for McDonald's ever again. By R.L. Rogers. Just to preface, I have a lot of scars on my arms. Not because I harm myself, but because my father likes to get wasted and beat me. Sometimes with the beer bottles he smashes after he's done drinking. So yeah, I have scars. Scars from all of the horrible shit I've gone through over the years. They go from my wrist up to my elbows, reminding me of all the times I had to protect myself from my father's drunken rage. Because of this, I wear long sleeves at work. That way nobody will make asshole remarks about it. Now, I'd been at the McDonald's in my hometown for over 2 years, mostly working nights. One day when I came in, I noticed a sign taped to the ice cream machine. Broken. Not an uncommon thing to happen, but we'd just gotten it fixed the week previous. Whatever, I thought, one less thing for me to clean. At around midnight, I was washing the windows across from the counter. All of a sudden I heard a low humming sound. I turned around to see where it was coming from. It was the ice cream machine. This was weird, considering it was supposedly broken. But I had known some of our appliances to spring back to life without warning, so I wasn't too spooked by it. I walked over to shut the thing off. About 5 feet away from the counter, I felt what seemed like water running down my arms. I thought it must have been a chill, but as I moved closer, the coolness turned to fire. I felt sharp pains wrapping around my arms, then moving up to my shoulders and down my back. I stopped walking and rolled up my left sleeve. At first, everything looked fine. Nothing unusual. I took another step forward before it hit me, and then looked back at my arm. My scars. They were gone. I quickly rolled up my other sleeve to check. It was the same. No scars in sight. I felt another watery sensation on my back, as if a whirlpool had opened up in my skin. I touched at the area under my shirt and felt it. Skin, not properly healed. Was it my scars? Freaked out, I backed up towards the windows. I watched my wounds as they slithered back onto my arms where they had been made. I froze for a moment, then took a few steps forward. My scars moved once again. I moved back and forth, towards and then away from the counter a few times. Every time I stepped forward, my scars squirmed like worms in the dirt. When I moved away, they went back into place. How was this possible? What was causing my wounds to travel around my body? Once I got used to my scars' movement, I decided to search for some answers. I looked behind the counter, near the fryer later, and further back by the grills. Then I noticed something. The ice cream machine had stopped humming. As I moved toward it, my scars began frantically snaking around my skin. Upon closer inspection, I noticed that the damn thing wasn't even plugged in. I opened up the lid, looked inside, and saw a silver liquid sloshing around where the ice cream normally was. I reached my hand towards it, if only out of curiosity. As my fingertips touched the surface, it stopped moving and my entire hand went numb. I felt a strange feeling come over me in the form of a thought. Was it alive? I put my hand in a little further and felt something within the wet metal. It was rough to the touch, but perfectly round. A metallic sphere of sorts. I tried to pull at it, but when I did, the liquid began crawling up my arm. Frightened, I pulled back and ran right out of the store, without even so much as saying anything to my manager. I got in my car and drove home, truly terrified of whatever it is I had felt. The next morning I woke up on the floor of my bedroom. A sudden dizziness compelled me to grab my head. It was warm, borderline feverish. Was the night before just a weird nightmare? Or did I smoke too much after getting out of work? Frazzled, I made my way to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. I placed my hands on both sides of the sink, staring deeply into my own eyes. I inhaled, closed my eyes, and lowered my head. When I opened them, I noticed it. They were gone. I raised my arms close to my face, twisting them side to side to check all around. My hands then darted to my back. They weren't there either. I quickly shut the doors of the bathroom and locked it. I undressed and scanned every inch of my body. My scars had vanished. Feeling born anew, healed from the troubles of my past, I exited the bathroom with my head held high. I didn't know how or why, but I was thankful. Completely elated, I decided to go about my day, venturing down to the kitchen for some breakfast. As I rummaged through the fridge, I heard a loud thud come from the direction of my father's bedroom. I glanced down the hall and noticed that the door was closed. I tiptoed over and cracked it open a bit, careful not to wake the beast. The room was pitch black. He had hung a blanket in front of the window to block out the light, as he often did when hung over. I felt along the wall for the light switched. When I flicked it on, I saw my father laying on the floor, his face beaten in. On his arms were scars, but not just any scars. They were mine. I'd recognize them anywhere. Next to him was a metallic silver sphere. I didn't think. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything that I probably should have. I just ran. There's Something Wrong with My Niece by Varox. There's something wrong with my niece. Not a birth defect, but something. The doctors say she shows signs of autism, except autism doesn't typically develop right away. Usually babies show a normal progression of development for the first few months, then start showing signs of autism. They usually initially respond to people. They make eye contact. They may even say their first words. And then their social development either delays, stops altogether, or seems to go backwards. That's why throughout history there's been myths of changeling babies. One day the baby seems fine, then suddenly the baby seems different. There's also one of the things that fuels the vaccines cause autism myth, because people can't understand how development can change so quickly. So they need something to blame, something to use as a scapegoat for taking away their baby, something to explain why their healthy baby is suddenly no longer a normal baby. Even though with the right education for parents on how to raise a child with autism, that child will still live a healthy, happy, normal life, albeit with some challenges. But my niece isn't a normal baby. Not because of the possible autism diagnosis, but because there's something off. Her entire life, as short as it's been so far, has been anything but normal. Her mother claimed it was immaculate conception. She claimed it was a miracle, that she was the chosen one, and swore on her life that it was a virgin birth. We all knew she was a cheating whore and full of shit, but for some reason my brother stayed with her. Maybe he was a hopeless romantic blinded by love, willing to believe any lie she told, or even just willing to pretend to believe it, to raise that baby as his own. Or maybe it was the massive, copious amount of drugs that they did together, where his brain was too fried to see how terrible of a person his wife was from the start. Maybe a bit of both. While the pregnancy was no miracle, the fact that the baby survived the pregnancy certainly was. The baby surviving the amount of drugs that her pregnant mother did, especially with having no physical defects, is a miracle. We didn't think that the baby would even be born. And Child Protective Services and the police can't do anything about a pregnant mother who smokes, drinks and does every drug she could get her hands on, except take the baby out of her custody after it's born. Her mother became increasingly more psychotic throughout the pregnancy, likely due to all the drugs. She started out ranting about how she was the chosen one, but as time went on, the more things escalated. She began to say that there was something wrong with her baby, but wouldn't say what, just that she needed to stop it. She disappeared for a few days, which wasn't irregular for her or for any junkie like her, so no one thought much of it. She was found in what was essentially a crack house, lying on the floor of the bathroom in a puddle of her own blood, with a handful of opioids, a bottle of whiskey, and an unfolded coat hanger by her side. She had attempted to give herself an abortion, and had ended up killing herself in the process. The baby survived. The paramedics were able to rescue the baby, though they were unable to revive the mother. She was far along enough in her pregnancy for the baby to survive out of the womb. The paramedics got there just in time to extract her and let her take her first breath on her own. It was a miracle. She was named Amira. Obviously, after all this trauma during pregnancy, along with being premature, there's going to be some medical problems with her. But that's not what's wrong with her. There's something about her. Something wrong. Even though the baby was not biologically his, my brother stepped up to care for her. He claimed he would get clean for her, that his life now had purpose, that he would do anything for her, because even if she wasn't biologically his child, she was still his child. After all, he was the one there throughout the pregnancy. He was the one who would be her father. Of course, that only lasted a few weeks, before he died from an overdose. No one was surprised. When you're already an addict and then go through something that traumatic, of course that's going to trigger something. The police found him on the floor next to Amira's crib. Although they expected her to be crying from hunger, or from the strangers, or the noise, she remained silent, just staring off into space as if she could see things that others can't. Amira's biological father was tracked down. Nobody was surprised that it wasn't a virgin birth, and he was given custody. He was an unsavory type of guy, as well you can imagine. A part-time drug dealer still living with his parents. But CPS thought at least his parents would care for Amira, and they did. For a few weeks, Amira's biological grandparents took care of that baby as if it were their own, even though her biological father was the deadbeat you'd expect him to be. One day, her biological grandfather hadn't reported to work for a few days, so police were sent to the house to check things out. There was a murder-suicide, where the deadbeat dad had stabbed both his parents over 40 times each, and then hung himself from the banister by the staircase. Police assumed Amira would have been killed as well, especially since the house was silent. But they found her, lying still in her crib with her piercing blue eyes, staring up at the ceiling, and not moving aside from the steady movement of her chest as she breathed. Once again, they were surprised she wasn't crying, especially since it had to have been a few days since she ate, or perhaps longer if there was any neglect. She hadn't even soiled her diaper at that time, so they assumed she had been starved for a while. All these incidents were unfortunate, but not completely out of the ordinary. Amira surviving them was a miracle, but unsavory type people meeting unfortunate ends is not entirely unheard of, so nobody thought much of it. Aside from, of course, empathy for Amira, the child who has had so short of a life so far, and yet had more trauma surrounding her than most of us ever will. I didn't find this strange enough or noteworthy enough to post here until the pattern continued. She was taken in by a foster family. They were killed in a car crash that appeared to be intentional. No skid marks on the road. The car was driven directly into a building. No traffic nearby to be swerving from. The foster mother, foster father, and one other foster child were killed, but Amira survived. Police said it was a miracle. They said had it not been for the baby carrier, she would have met the same fate, but the way it cradled her protected her. She was taken in by another foster family. The rest of the family died in a house fire, while she and her new foster mother were at an appointment with a paediatrician. The new foster mother committed suicide days later. My parents, overwhelmed with guilt for not intervening earlier, decided to adopt her. They felt that if my brother treated her as his child, they ought to treat her as his child, and that she should be part of our family instead of having to jump through foster homes her whole life. On some level, I think they thought it was their last possible chance to connect with my brother. I think they also thought it was their second chance at raising my brother, but this time they'd do something different to make sure she didn't meet the same fate. They died a few days ago from carbon monoxide poisoning. They left the car running in the garage and just sat there. Amira was left safely inside the house. Police say there was no foul play, and that it was obviously intentional. They said the pain of losing my brother had to have gotten to them and sent them over the edge. I knew them though, and they were never the type of people to do such a thing, especially when they were so committed to helping Amira. I was the one named in the will for being the next guardian of Amira, and how could I refuse? She's family, sort of. And even if she isn't, she's still just a child. An innocent infant who's been caught in the middle of tragedy after tragedy, and needs somebody who will care for her. I know that logically, she isn't responsible for all these things. How could she be when she's just an infant? She can't walk, talk, or even crawl yet, let alone be capable of murder and cover-ups. It's been a few days, and I've never heard her cry, or even make a noise. The doctors say that's the autism. She never moves, and always stares off into the distance. The doctors say there's a chance she has paralysis, though they can't find any physical reason for it. But more likely, she simply doesn't move because she doesn't want to. She's quite possibly the easiest baby to take care of ever, and the type that parents could only dream of. But sometimes, when I walk into her line of sight, I feel a sharp cold like stepping out into the dead of winter, and this pressure building up inside of me, like I'll explode, or more likely vomit or pass out if I don't do something, though I'm not sure what it is I'm supposed to do. And at night, I could swear I hear someone whispering through the baby monitor. Well, listeners, I sincerely hope you enjoyed the tales that I brought you this evening. It would be a great pleasure to me if you would like, comment, and subscribe, if you're not already a subscriber. And please wait for me to bring you more tales to alter your perception of how the world may really be. This is Ramblingramm, signing off. Good night, listeners, and sweet dreams.